Hey everyone, Professor Snart checking in for Unit 11 here, which is revising poems, which is one of those things that could actually be, I've mentioned this before, could really be the focus of our entire course, since the production of poems is not usually a problem outside of an occasional, bout of writer's block for people, but it's really the revising part that that gets substantially better with practice, but is also one of the hardest parts about being a writer, to be honest. So we look in this unit very specifically at revision, but like I said before, the entire course could be called, instead of poetry writing, which is relatively easy to do, at least compared with poetry revising, which could be a better name for the course. But anyway, obviously revision is in some ways very straightforward. You understand that revision is simply going back to work that you've produced and seeing sort of two things at once. The editing side of it, making sure that there's no typos or grammar mistakes unless you want them, or just basic stuff like that. So sort of the small nitpicky stuff. But the other part of revision, and really the part that we're more concerned with, is literally kind of a revision or re-seeing of a poem in terms of really taking a look at the big picture and not being too concerned with just the editing, the minutiae of that sort of stuff, but really opening ourselves up to deleting big sections of a poem, really rethinking who the speaker is, where it's set, what kinds of imagery or metaphor or simile run through it, and all that kind of stuff, which is a lot more daunting because it means, in many ways, it feels like working backwards. You've made this progress to get stuff on the page or on the computer screen, you've typed it out, and now to begin messing with it seems like you don't really want to go deleting stuff or changing stuff. You'd rather just make a few little editorial changes and call it quits for that one. So revision of the global kind is really the maybe the fundamental challenge that most writers, and not just poets, but writers of any kind, really face. So we'll look pretty specifically then at that problem in this unit, and in a couple of different ways. So in addition to the introductory reading and then the reading assignment from the textbook, there's two separate writing assignments. One has you actually doing some revision to poems that you've already written. There's a few different prompts. There's 5 different activities that you can choose from. You're choosing 3. To try as a revising strategy, or sort of an approach to take while revising for poems that you've already written. So obviously that is really getting into the nuts and bolts and really forcing yourself, which is sometimes what we need to actually look at a poem again and try to take it on as a revision project. The other part of this unit then is a fairly straightforward discussion board that's really talking about the idea of revision and getting us to think about strategies to make it more effective, or really just ways of thinking about it such that we're not always feeling like in revising we end up kind of backtracking or taking steps in the wrong direction as opposed to moving forward with a poem. In fact, we are moving forward in the act of revision, but I know, as a writer myself, I know that revising does not always feel like you're making positive steps towards something. It feels often like you're fiddling with something that should just be left alone, but that is usually just our resistance to doing the hard work of revising. Rarely do we have a poem, especially one that we've maybe just drafted, that is in its original state, that draft state, actually better than what we could work it towards through various stages of revision. So you sort of have to trust that even if it doesn't feel like it all the time, that really intense revision is actually moving you in the right direction, even though, again, it doesn't always feel that way. So Unit 11 then, revising, and then we get into Unit 12, which will be our next workshop poem, or next workshop unit, and that'll be actually our last workshop for the course. So this would be a really good opportunity in terms of this unit, and then of course looking towards the next one, to really take a moment to think about, especially that final workshop unit, is that the opportunity you have in the class to, even though we're working in a really compressed time frame here as far as writing goes, to see if you can begin to sort of put into practice some of the things that we've been thinking about in a more intentional way than maybe you had before. So people are unlikely at this point in the course, and really as soon as we finish, to be fundamentally different writers. We just don't change that quickly. But hopefully what the course has provided, and certainly what you come out the end of it with, is new strategies, new ideas, new things that you can begin to put into practice that become more habitual, like revision, that point you in the right direction so that you continue to improve as a writer. So I guess one of the frustrating things is that unlike other kinds of classes where you accumulate a lot of knowledge, finish the class and feel like, wow, I know a lot about France that I didn't know before. I mean, we all know that knowledge is likely to disappear as soon as you get it out onto a test. So poetry writing, this kind of course doesn't offer that immediate feedback or that immediate kind of gratification. You sort of have to wait for that to come in the mail a little bit. But revision is one of those really fundamental kind of activities that we need to be aware of as writers and really wade into as best we can, even though, again, sometimes it's the most uncomfortable kind of activity that we can be involved in. It feels just like we're doing damage to a poem that doesn't deserve it somehow. We're taking advantage of this innocent thing that's just sitting there. But you have to trust and tell your poem this too, that revision is moving in the right direction. You just have to trust that. Okay, so be in touch with any questions, and I look forward to seeing what people have to say about revision and then actually putting into practice some of those revision strategies.